So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar this afternoon, this virtual launch, in fact, of one of our newest pieces of research from the ACE. So I'm Hannah Vickers, I'm the Chief Exec of the Association for Consultancy and Engineering. And whether you are one of our members or a member of the wider sector, you're all very welcome. So please feel free to join in, whether you're a consultant or not, you're all very welcome here. This is something that we have been working on in terms of the future of the workplace, and this piece of research is particularly special, particularly close to my heart, because this has been done commissioned by our emerging professionals. So perhaps slightly unusually, slightly different if you've been to other report launches that we have done or that other organisations have done. This one is actually completely, completely nothing to do with AC, but that's not quite the case. It's actually something which has come through our emerging professionals, and I hope gives you a really interesting and different perspective, perhaps on our sector and where we might want to take things in the future. So I'm just going to begin by giving a bit of context to this report. So this forms part of our Future of Consultancy campaign that we've been running for about 18 months now. So in October last year, we launched the Future of Consultancy strategy, which set out how the consultancy businesses would adapt and evolve over the next 10 years, focusing on the changing demands the clients would have of us, but also how digital transformation would evolve our businesses and change what we deliver ourselves. So in terms of implementing that overall strategy, we then moved our research and our focus into particular enablers. The first of these is around business models and procurement. So we've been working very closely with clients on that, shifting how they come to market. The second is on investing in innovation and technology to allow us to bring new insights to clients, but also automate and make ourselves more productive in how we work. And then thirdly, and what we're going to focus on today, around the skills and the capabilities of the future workforce. So a little bit of advice before we get started. So something from myself to everybody who is watching. I think when I read this report, I was really pleased that I think there's something in it for every business, whether you're a consultant or whether you're from the wider sector. In particular, I would watch out for the advice that our emerging professionals are giving us here around the culture of the workplace and their expectations on that, but also how you might structure your businesses, how you might form teams differently in future. So those are my top tips, my edited highlights, but I don't want to steal the thunder of the team who've been working on this, who are going to bring it to life in a way that perhaps only they can, with their age and their energy and their perspective on this. So I think without further ado, I'd like to start to hand over to some of our speakers. So in terms of who we've got speaking today, it's a very exciting agenda. So we actually have, this has really captured the attention, not just of our clients, but actually of central government. So I'm going to introduce in a second the Construction Minister, Nadhim Zahawi, who has been keeping a close eye on this research and has sent us a special video message for our launch today, as he can't be with us. And then we've got a panel debate and discussion where we're going to have the insights from the report brought to life by our emerging professionals and a bit of Q&A. So just before we kick off with the speakers, I wanted to remind everybody that we have got Q&A. So as we're going through the presentations, please do pop your questions in the chat bar and we will come to them and we'll come to those later on. And if there's anything we can't answer today, we will follow up on. So I think on that basis, I'm now delighted to introduce, to kick us off, the Construction Minister, Nadhim Zahawi, with his view on why this report and these insights from our emerging professionals are so important for our industry and what the government wants to see from us going forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you are all keeping well. Clearly, with all of us sat miles apart at this lunchtime, it would be fair to say that the world has seen better days. The COVID pandemic has hit us all in one way or another. Sadly, we again find ourselves living under the weight of national restrictions, and we are likely to feel the impact of the virus for some time, albeit there's been some fantastic work on vaccines. And yet, when I look out on our country, I absolutely do not feel glum. On the contrary, I find that there are many reasons to be positive. When I look at our collective response to this virus, when I see people supporting their local businesses and helping out their neighbors, and when I see the ambitions we have for clean, resilient, dynamic recovery, I feel really encouraged. And of course, when I see Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, standing in the House of Commons and committing billions of pounds to reducing carbon emissions, and Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, standing in Dudley back in June behind that lectern that read "Bill, Bill, Bill," it was clear to me, and I hope to you as well, that we have a bold, positive vision for the future of this country beyond COVID. And I'm pleased to see that you have one too, as ACE's Emerging Professionals Group has set out in the Future of the Workplace report, which I am delighted to be here to launch today. The report paints I think, a compelling picture of the hopes and expectations that are the rising generation of professionals from across the industry have for their workplace. Business leaders of tomorrow, like Georgia, Nikita, Jordan, and Rebecca, who are contributing to proceedings today. I thank you and I absolutely salute you. As you will hear, the findings of the new research shine a spotlight on workplace cultures in consultancy and the interplay between the aspirations of the emerging professional and the needs of businesses. This is, of course, a highly pertinent topic because COVID-19 has really turned our traditional notions of the workplace completely on their head. The report invites us to consider how the workplace can adapt for the better to a new normal, a hybrid maybe. So needless to say, I very much welcome it. It is timely and thought-provoking, and I'm not surprised in the least by how insightful it is, because as many of you will be aware, I've been working with ACE's CEO, Hannah Vickers, for many months now on the Construction Leadership Council Task Force. And I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge all the hard work that Hannah has done since the start of the pandemic, helping to guide the industry through one of the most challenging periods, I think, in its history. Her leadership has been key to the establishment of the Construction Talent Retention Scheme and to its ongoing success. And Hannah has played I think, a really important role in the development of the forthcoming construction playbook, a new, more collaborative procurement and supplier management strategy. It will come as no surprise to anyone to hear me say, because the Prime Minister and I have said it repeatedly, that construction has a crucial role to play in the UK's economic recovery from the pandemic. And that is why I think the key focus for the Future of the Workplace report, the attraction, retention, and development of a more diverse workforce and greater support for emerging professionals is more important than ever. As a government, we are doing all we can to retain the skills of the sector and to reach out to other sectors, bringing in new people who might possess the skills that the industry will need in the future. We're working across government and industry to identify the skills gaps to deliver the next generation workforce for the sector. My department, BAYS, has already invested £1 million in the Construction Talent Retention Scheme, which many companies across the country are using to protect and retain skills whilst keeping the industry moving forward. So we should all take the recommendations of the Future of the Workplace report seriously. We must continue to work together to ensure the retention of every skilled person that we can, and to ensure that the industry has the ability to adapt to new ways of working, new technologies, and of course, new approaches. However, whilst we cannot shy away from the many challenges we face at this moment of unprecedented flux and uncertainty, we must not forget that there are opportunities too. As the report illustrates, there is a chance here for the sector to grasp a much bigger opportunity for the long term. As ACE's Future of Consultancy strategy highlights, consultancy businesses need to show clients and society how they will deliver the full package of social, economic, and environmental value in the future, and how they will do so through the design, delivery, and operation of the built and natural environment. The so-called golden thread running throughout this new research is the desire of both professionals and businesses to deliver against a much broader definition of value. It is clear to me that professionals are looking for more purpose and more meaningful work as well. In my view, I think they want to feel invigorated and energized and passionate about their work, to feel that they are making a real difference, and to start and end their working day certain that they have a crucial role to play in solving the many challenges that lie ahead of them and, of course, all of us. The report's writers acknowledge this. They hope, they say that at the very least, the report can promote debate and a better mutual understanding. And I am sure that it will, because it centralizes the importance of diversity and difference, which is a topic very close to my own heart, as many of you would have heard me speak of before. When people in groups are drawn from diverse backgrounds and experiences, they are better able to bring different perspectives, information, and ideas to the table, and absolutely create better businesses. And in fact, it is proven that more diverse a leadership team, the better a company's financial performance is. Through the Future of the Workplace report, I was delighted to learn that ACE have committed to setting stringent diversity and inclusion targets for member companies, working with business leaders to improve those targets, and that ACE will play a key role in providing support and information on diversity and inclusion, particularly to the small and medium-sized members, because diversity is not only important from an ethical point of view. As I've just said, we know that diversity is good business. At the start of my remarks, I said that I am optimistic about the future, and I hope that you are too. This report and today's launch, I think, certainly gives us cause to be optimistic. And I'm sure that if ACE's members move quickly, they can create the workplaces and cultures they need to be successful in this new business environment. And at the same time, I think improve their ability to attract, retain, and develop the future workforce. Shortly, Simon, Mark, Martin, and Leslie will be along to discuss the report's recommendations in greater detail and explore what they mean for SMEs and, of course, large consultancies as well. And as we move into 2021, I will look forward to hearing about how they have implemented this work, because they are important recommendations They really are incredibly important for the changing workplace, its changing culture, and for increasing the diversity and inclusion of the workforce operating within it. And I think if you haven't got the message yet, it is all about diversity and inclusion of the workforce. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, so there's some strong words there from our construction minister, some great endorsements and support for the report, and no doubt from that he will definitely be on my case next year in terms of how we implement this. So without further ado, I wanted to hand over to Mark Naismith, who is Chief Exec of WSP, who is going to take us through the next section of the presentations and debate. Over to you, Mark.
Okay, thanks, Hannah. Hi, everybody, and thank you all again for joining this webinar today. As Hannah said, I'm Mark Naismith. I'm a board member of the ACE and also the chair of the ACE Skills Group, and I'm also the CEO for WSP in the UK and Africa. And it is my pleasure today to chair the remainder of this webinar to launch the Future of the Workplace report. And thank you to Hannah for her introduction and for the powerful key message that we've just heard from the Construction Minister. My key takeaway from the Minister's message was be positive about the future, but we do need to change our way of working, and also the importance of our emerging professionals in the industry. And that plays very nicely into our next speaker. I'd now like to introduce Georgia Hughes. Georgia is a senior management consultant with Arcadis and is currently the ACE's Emerging Professionals National Chair and has been the driving force behind this excellent piece of work. Georgia's been working tirelessly for the last 12 months to create this report with a team round about her, and which has consulted widely with academia, clients and ACE member companies. So Georgia, I'm sure everybody's excited to hear from you. So without further ado, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. So I would like to take you through today the sort of high-level overview of what we're seeing from the Future of Consultancy report. Apologies about that. So as we've sort of heard from the Minister and Hannah and Mark have outlined, the ACE's Future of Consultancy campaign is built around a vision which provides a new role for engineering and consultancy as a technical client partner who can unlock value from physical infrastructure and its digital. And this campaign looks to a future where consultancy businesses will deliver this role, not just at a project level, but across the whole networks too, supporting the project delivery and strategic planning and operation aspect. But what does all of this mean for the future of the workplace? And as we've said already, the ACE Emerging Professional Group was tasked by Hannah back in October of last year to start looking at what the future of the workplace would look like and how we can bring this to life. We are a network created and run by those working in the built and natural environment across the United Kingdom. And I'm really pleased to say that we've got representation today from both our Northwest and our London and South East committees, who will be joining us as a part of the panel discussion a bit later on. Broadly speaking, we're a network for those within sort of the first 5 years of their career. However, any and all who have an interest within the built and natural environment are welcome to join our sessions and our committees and events and participate as we move forwards. So this today is the launch of our Future of the Workplace report, delivering value driven by values. It's embracing the opportunities identified within the Future of Consultancy campaign, trying to understand who will be working within consultancy businesses, what will they be doing, and most importantly, how will they be doing it. This report highlights what motivates the young people and emerging professionals who are going to be the future of consultancy. What do they need from their workplace to be able to flourish? And what do we need to know about our evolving industry in order to support them to make the right choices for their careers? What do consultancies need to take from their emerging professionals if they're to become the next step and the future leaders and custodians of our industry? We recognise that, as the Minister set out, this is a mix of both large consultancies and small and medium enterprises, and it's not possible to produce the perfect definition of what a workplace should look like for every ACE member firm. However, what we can identify are the role families that will be created as the businesses start to evolve and how they can create capabilities in order to meet changing client needs. If we also take a step back from this, it is possible for us to pinpoint and understand some general characteristics of the people we engaged with that we believe will allow consultancies to provide the environment for emerging professionals to thrive in. And finally, if we can agree on all of these role families and these characteristics to understand what better drives an emerging professional, we can also create plans to help consultancies make the changes that they need in order to be successful over the next decade and beyond. So what I'd like to introduce to you today are the 3 themes and areas which we've gathered our insight from and what these look like. The first of these identifies the changing workforce. So what's different about this generation of emerging professionals? What motivates them and what do they feel that they need from the workplace in order to be successful? The changing role families. So how are the skills needed by consultancy businesses changing? How are the groups of professionals being organised to create value and align their capabilities? And how does this mean in the way that consultancy businesses interact with one another, our clients, our contractors, and other players that sit within the infrastructure ecosystem? And then finally, the changing workplace. So what are the characteristics of the workplace that we will need in order to allow consultancies to thrive? If our AC members can move quickly, as highlighted by the Minister, there is an opportunity for us to create a workplace culture for our emerging professionals and other employees to be successful, to allow them to attract and retain and develop the future workforce. We're badging this all together as the workplace promise. And I'll step through an overview of what each of these mean and what we believe we're going to need in order to build this promise over the next 12 months, working with ACE and other member firms. So the changing workforce, which is driven by value and moulded by technology and climate. So this is a generation that we're defining as both millennials and Generation Z, who may or may not be more idealistic and value driven than previous generations, but they are unquestionably better informed. The internet has made vast quantities of information easily accessible and fostered an ability and an expectation of transparency from these emerging professionals. When we look at the sort of collaborative communaholics, author Timms and Himes provide a pinpoint to some of the biggest video games of the successive generations to illustrate the impact of growing up on the web and different attitudes towards power and hierarchy. We saw in the 80s and 90s millions of people playing Tetris, sitting on their own, arranging shapes that fell into the sky, sent for them by an unseen, impersonal hand. However, when we look at this current generation, we have millions of those who grew up working with Minecraft and the sort of Sim City, where they're in an open world in which they decide what to build, how to build, and who to build it with. Against that backdrop, it's hardly surprising that global consultancy firm McKinsey described this generation as communaholics. For today's emerging, and we sort of see this as a need to create better collaboration across the way in which we work. For today's emerging professionals, we're the most diverse and inclusive generation to enter the workplace. There is an increasing sophisticated and nuanced idea of what diversity and inclusion should mean, extending well beyond just gender and ethnicity to embrace areas such as neurodiversity and diversity of thought within projects and leadership teams. A lot of this was brought to light earlier this year through the global force of the Black Lives Matter movement, and we saw many firms standing strong against racism, inequality, and injustice. But the call to action needs to be more than just a press release. Emerging professionals and their colleagues want to see real substantiated changes within their businesses, and it has to start with having those difficult and uncomfortable conversations to enact real and long-lasting change. And finally, this generation will be tackling the overriding issue of climate change. We know that over the last 2 decades, we've seen increased warnings around how we're structured with climate change and what the effects of that will be. And globally, our sector, built to natural environment, is responsible for 39% of all carbon emissions, and 28% of these carbon emissions account for operations of asset. It's imperative that as a sector, we work together to drive down our carbon emissions through better design and understanding of how to improve the use of operations within our asset. And we're seeing our clients become much more aware of the importance of this, with the financial sector committing to net zero by 2050 targets, and local authorities setting out ambitious plans for 2040 and beyond. This is the sort of meaning meaningful and purposeful work that emerging professionals are passionate about contributing, challenging and testing the status quo of how we've designed and built our societies around us so far. The changing role families. So at the same time as we see a shift in how we're looking at delivering the future of consultancies for our clients, we're also understanding and seeing a shift in various generational challenges, include the transition to a net zero carbon economy, levelling up of equality of opportunity, and now most forthright within people's minds, the recovery from COVID-19. This means that what we're looking for, what our clients are looking for, investors and society are, is demanding a better infrastructure, and that demand is becoming much broader and much more complex. All this growing complexity is highlighted in the balance between the workload moving away from new builds and towards interventions designed to get more out of our existing assets and built systems. Against all of this is how to best understand the deep technical expertise which is at the core offering of most of ACE's member firms, but then combining this with a greater digital acumen and collaborative problem solving for an individual skill sets. Within this, we see three sort of broad groups: the core technical skills, in which we're traditionally embedded in, and sort of looking at how we can retain that deep technical expertise at the heart of our offering. We see our roles changing, with some firms expecting to review and establish more consultancy, advisory, project management and digital-based roles. And we also see capability shifting, and based on our research, we've now got member firms basing their offer around leadership, collaborative delivery and capabilities in terms of being able to bring all this together. So delivering value really means us being able to understand what our customers' needs and problems are, and being able to design and deliver a solution that meets these needs. To support this, and through our findings and our research, we have grouped these into two broad structures: role family A and role family B. For different consultancy businesses, preference for structure A or B is in part a reflection on the different starting points from each of the businesses. Structure A is perhaps more attractive for multidisciplinary firms with ambitions to offer a full through life cycle and client technical partner role within the future of consultancy vision. However, structure B works well as a way forward for those niche technical specialists, providing part of the role in partnership with others. And then finally, the changing workplace and the 8 characteristics that we see that a business will need to provide in order to thrive. Some of these aren't new and they're not groundbreaking, but in order to understand how our workforce is changing moving forward, we need to go beyond these characteristics as stated here, and these need to become the basic expectations of workplace culture, both for ourselves as businesses, but also for our clients. We recognise the change in needs to come from both sides, and there must be an ebb and flow to every relationship, and we want to work with our businesses in order to create a workplace where emerging professionals can flourish and are understood within our industry. It is worth repeating again that there is no single template for all ACE members to follow, and firms of different sizes and specialisms will always have to make decisions about what works best for them and for their clients. Here we're setting out just an overview of what these characteristics should be. I won't go through all of these in detail. As you can imagine, there's quite a bit of content behind each of them, and you'll find these detailed within the report. But what I will touch upon is walking the talk and transparency. So within walking the talk, we've seen already that we live in an age where there is a gap between the rhetoric that senior leaders are passing down and the reality of what we're picking up on the ground, which comes through very quickly. Many of our younger consultants that we spoke to didn't doubt the sincerity of what our senior leaders were saying, but felt that intentions hit a buffer of middle management with the incentivization of trying to get the job done and not always feeling like there was sort of true values being pushed through. We also heard that there was a increasing frustration around how the commitment to social value or sustainability failed to find its way into design briefs or procurement processes within that middle management tier. So then moving on to look at sort of the transparency aspect. As I've already touched upon, the millennials and Gen Z are sort of used to that Minecraft style role where they have very little time for hierarchies, the amount of time served in a role or gender pay gaps, and the tap on the shoulder approach to progression. We're used to a highly structured education and we've experienced growing up online, which has created an expectation of regular, or in some cases even instantaneous, feedback. While this can create friction within multi-generational workplaces, we're starting to acknowledge, and we've seen firms across AC's members starting to sort of recognise that emerging professionals want, in terms of transparency or fairness, is good feedback, which is, you know, a positive for all employees across the business. So now I'll take you through sort of our recommendations and what we're seeing moving forward over the next 12 months. And in order for us to create a workplace to foster and encourage growth, freedom, safe spaces to fail, and setting your emerging professionals up for success, we believe that these 3 key areas set out as the workplace promise, with these key deliverables comprised over the course of 2021, will enable our sector to become the sector of choice for those seeking rewarding and challenging places to work, with projects and clients who truly want to make a difference to both our society and our changing climate. These 3 core deliverables are, as you can see, split between the themes that we've had moving forwards over the course of this, and that we'll sort of go into have further discussions with our business leaders and emerging professionals in a minute. But I'll just give you an opportunity to sort of have a look and an oversight of the recommendations that we're suggesting and how we see this moving forward over the course of the next year. So thank you very much. I'd like to hand back to Mark now, who can take us through the next steps for this.
Okay, thank you, Georgia, and thank you for presenting the report, which was very insightful and pleased to say very forward-thinking, and a piece of work that I'm sure will prove to be extremely thought-provoking and hopefully very relevant to the listeners on the webinar, particularly given the current unprecedented circumstances relating to the pandemic, but also because, as we all know, we're in the digital age and there is a desire in our industry to be more efficient and effective and to deliver our important part in reducing the carbon footprint in our design and construction activities. So many of these issues are unrelated to the pandemic, but I think, as the Minister mentioned earlier, the pandemic has certainly helped to accelerate our thinking and progress in these areas. So thank you very much, Georgia, and we'll come back to you again shortly. Moving on though, conscious of time today, to our next session, and I'm really pleased to be joined by a fantastic mix of panellists from a broad mixture of backgrounds and experience relating to our industry and the workplace essentials. And in a moment, I'm going to ask each panellist to give us their 5-minute perspective and comments on the future of the workplace report, with an emphasis being on the 3 key themes that George has just spoken about: the changing workforce, the changing roles, and the changing workplace. Once we've heard from the panelists, we'll then be taking questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please do post them in the chat box and we'll generate a 20-minute Q&A session after the panelists have spoken. So again, without further ado, I'd just like to quickly introduce each of our panelists in running order before we hear from each of them. So first of all, from our business leaders, I'm very pleased to welcome Leslie Hume. Leslie is the Chief Information Officer for WSP in the UK and South Africa, and she's also responsible for managing WSP's IT strategy and the operations and all matters relating to the corporate real estate. She's also a member of the UK Executive Committee and a member of WSP's Global IT Leadership Team. So welcome, Leslie. We've also got Simon Innes. Simon, thank you for joining. Simon's the Managing Director of Goodson Associates, Consulting Engineers. Simon's based in Edinburgh, like myself, and he's currently the Vice Chairman of the ACE with responsibilities for the devolved nations and SMEs. We then have Martin Sylvester. So again, thank you, Martin, for joining us. Martin's the Global Director for Workplace and Travel at Arcadis, and he focuses on creating and implementing a workplace strategy that optimizes a global real estate portfolio aligned around the goals for employee experience and satisfaction. We then have 3 emerging professionals joining us today, so I'm very pleased to introduce Nikita Kumar. Nikita is a Senior Policy Advisor at the Department of International Trade, and Nikita's had, she's established a professional and personal initiatives to promote anti-racism, diversity, inclusion, and equality in the workplace. So welcome, Nikita. We then have Jordan Mclachlan. Jordan is a development infrastructure engineer at WSP, and he's devoted to making a positive and lasting contribution to the world through his work. Seeing the social and environmental importance of engineering, Jordan looks to diversify the industry at senior leadership level. And then finally, we have Rebecca King, and Becca is the head of learning and development at Curtins and leads on the wider people strategy across all technical and non-technical roles. Rebecca's personal interest in the future skills and workforce planning, together with her passion for industry initiatives such as reverse mentoring. So looking forward to hearing from each of you. So again, without further ado, I'm going to hand now over to Leslie, and then we'll take it in the order that I've just gone through. So over to you, Leslie.
As ever, the 2-second delay on finding the mute button. Good afternoon, everybody. Delighted and very privileged to be with you today. I know Georgia and others commented earlier that, and Hannah, that we've got a very global group. I think especially jealous of the person who's in Durban or perhaps Honolulu at the moment, but there we are. As Mark said, I look after IT and corporate real estate for WSP in this region. Previous to that, I was in the Cabinet Office, and I think very much tethered to my sort of background in the engineering consultancy. I was very privileged to be the head of profession for project and program management for the Cabinet Office, and also sat on the Infrastructure Projects Authority board with Tony Meggs leading that for some time. So I've been delighted to have always been kept tethered to this industry, which I'm really passionate about. So around the evolution of roles and the changing roles is a theme that I was asked to sort of touch on and focus on. And for me, there are kind of 3 key areas, if you will, in my mind, and that is digital, diversity and experience, plus I think a key ingredient for a very successful consultancy future, which is collaboration and partnership. All these aspects to the roles of the future, I feel, have huge impact. Some threats for sure, but also enormous opportunity in our industry. Really important to me as a CIO, let's touch on the digital age that Mark and others mentioned. This ever-changing, ever-growing landscape of technology, and more importantly for me, I think, is data. This area truly does change the roles that we need to develop to really attract and retain the very best people in our organizations. If we look at the emergence of 2 things, in my view, that actually, I think, sort of illustrate the point. Firstly, underlining some of the points Georgia made, disruption, new entrants to our industry who don't employ thousands of consulting engineers. They have very different roles to the ones that we have right now. For example, startups that harvest data and use it with AI to disrupt established business processes. If I touch on the example that I saw last year, actually, when we used to travel, when I was lucky enough to spend a day at the Google campus in Mountain View, California. Once, let me tell you, I had worked out with the accent of our workshop lead around what Gen Zs were. They said Gen Z so quickly that I had no understanding that it was actually Generation Z that he was talking about. But I saw a kind of prototype from their Alphabet business in Sidewalk Labs, which was part of Alphabet. They claimed to be able to optimize the design of neighborhoods, even cities, using algorithms in minutes, a very different role set that organization has. And this presumably is all supported by incredible data compiled by Google. What we have here is something that actually Toronto have taken on, albeit postponed by COVID, to design an experimental neighborhood, very different roles that they're looking at fusing there. Tech houses are accumulating masses of data and bringing in roles and people that really understand how to mine that data and how to analyze that data. And they're now turning that data into potential product that could aim to at least partially replace our roles and our human expertise. And for me, this is our future competition. Another example that I observed when I was last in Dubai with some of the small startups I saw there in the Middle East, their ability to design whole hospitals and design huge master plans of social housing using AI rather than the armies of consultant engineers. Again, looking at that shift in the roles. We also have our own mainstream vendors, Autodesk, Bentley. I believe there is a threat here in how their service offerings are evolving and developing, and how the roles within those organizations are developing, bringing huge challenge again to our industry. Secondly, the gig economy, the threat of different delivery models and roles of the engineering design and analysis, where they are emerging examples in the industry of companies using gig economy to push research and design into this approach, driving innovation in a very different way to how we use it within our roles within our current organizations. And also importantly, not only changing those roles, but reducing the number of permanent employees that they need, not just the roles. Again, as a specific example, GE using the internet to drive innovation by setting very different challenges and paying those that respond with ideas and design. So roles and people, not even within their own organizations, using research and design teams outside of their own organization to come up with products and services. And I think this is a really important segue from the changing workforce that the Minister outlined, and building on a point that I have always been really passionate about, which is diversity. And I use the word diversity in its absolutely broadest sense when I think about changing roles. It's important to consider in those changing roles the impact and the opportunity of the changing expectations of the workforce and the roles that they want to fill in the future with us. The ACE reports covers this really well in terms of generational changes in people's expectations of a role and a career, and of the company and the values and the culture of that company that they want to work for. And I think this all links to what Georgia outlined in the role families, career pathways, but also a capability framework that I really feel passionate that we need to come together with ACE helping us on this for the digital age of consultancy. I think we truly ignore this all at our peril. It will, in my view, seriously undermine the consulting engineering industry. And I make no apology for being a little controversial here, as it is currently largely run by traditionally minded white male engineers who might be more disposed to dismiss the whims of the youngsters until they realize they are losing employees and can't recruit them because their organizations, and importantly the roles within those organizations, simply are not as attractive to the next generation. On this point also, I think we must play into the evolution of our roles is the big change in the broader environmental challenge. Mark touched on this, the Minister touched on this, the challenge of global warming and decarbonisation. This is something our younger and new generations entering the workforce care passionately about. And if we don't embrace that and include that in the roles and their objectives going forward, it's an opportunity and a threat to our industry if we get it right, or indeed if we get it wrong. And finally, to my third area, which is around collaboration and partnership. And I think this is a big change and evolution in our roles going forward. Consultancies need to embrace all of these elements in defining and evolving roles within our organizations. We must replace some of those roles with automation for sure, with AI, with data analysis, and other areas within the digital and technical space. But also, to put a very positive spin on it, underpinning this is the ability to expand the current roles we have and create different roles for the future that will enhance the products and services that we deliver, their usefulness to our clients, but also we use the other elements of the kind of digital roles and external forces to drive improved efficiency within our organizations and, importantly, increase profitability. So for me, in summary, consultancies need the diversity of thinking to bring something additive to data-based offerings that would-be up-and-coming digital and technology competitors have. Consultancies need to justify that real essence of human expertise, which I believe must have an important place over these services and shiny technical solutions that others bring, or otherwise indeed combine with them, embrace and partner with them. And for me, I feel the pursuit of excellence in project and program management is one of the core foundations that we should build on in our roles and our future emerging roles in this consultancy space. I think it's absolutely a key human element that we should pursue. Sidewalk labs may still be a way off, but it and its ilk are rising fast. And the danger will be blindly carrying on and ignoring this capability and the roles that that capability bring to our industry without seeking to match it or indeed complement it. So that's, for me, the collaboration and partnership point, and building on organizing to create value, consultancies working more closely with each other, blurring the competition lines and embracing other sectors, both private and public sector, and ultimately being more involving of our clients. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Leslie. Simon, over to you for your 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Much appreciated, and thank you, Leslie, for those comments. First of all, I'd like to really thank the ACE and the emerging professionals for producing this very interesting and thought-provoking report. The report is received very warmly by the industry, and I'm sure will give us debating points for the industry to come. And I thank Georgia and her committee for all the hard work that's involved in this. You'll find that my wife's printing something in the background, so I apologise for any sound interference. So what I would like to do is I'd like to just focus on one of the main themes that was described by Georgia, and that's the changing workforce. It's subtitled value-driven and moulded by technology and climate, and I'd really like to touch on all three of these elements. As managing director of a medium-sized regionally based SME consultancy, and having spent about 40 years in the industry, I have seen the many changes in the workforce over the years. The report highlights many of these challenges faced and often missed by the industry. So thank you for raising these things. The first key point for me raised by the report is that the workforce is becoming better informed. They've been brought up in their informative years with the internet. And what comes with that is an expectancy of transparency, but also an awareness of the fake news that's out there. I must admit, when I was going through my formative years, all we had was, if we were lucky, was a set of Encyclopedia Britannica, and that was our vision of the world. And indeed, we had no idea about how companies worked or how until you got in and found out for yourself. And that even then was pretty difficult. I'm not sure I even know now, to be honest. Today, the employees can readily see what the companies are doing and can easily value that against other employers within the sector. The report mentions the companies can be found out if rhetoric is not matched in reality, and can lead to discontent and ultimately lack of retention. This generates an impatience with hierarchy that needs to be challenged by supporting the employers. So as a SME, we can't afford to take on new, enthusiastic and talented staff and lose them soon after they joined. We need to develop strategies that nurture these employees within our individual firms. We also need to ask the changing workforce to understand the needs of the business and to be patient about these changes. There is a need to develop strategies that support and encourage the ever-changing workforce, so that when the current emerging professionals are in their management positions, they can positively develop the next generation to come On the basis that we haven't got Z anymore, I don't know where that's going, but we'll work on that. There is a quote in the report. They come to us for 3 or 5 years, do something brilliant, and move on to the next experience. As a regional SME, we need to ensure that that something brilliant can be delivered within our projects, and that next experience is with us rather than others. Through all this, I believe we can ensure that loyalty is developed throughout the company from both sides, from the employees and employers. The report in Figure 3 tabulates the old power values against the new power values. The challenge for us as an industry and as SMEs is to merge and integrate these values to form combined power values to help the transition of these generations and the future generations to come. So moving on, the report also discusses Minecraft, not Tetris. In fact, with my age, it's not Tetris, it's more like Pong. However, the comparison is still very apt. The collaboration approach of activities generated by Minecraft and other collaborative computer games needs to be grasped and nurtured by the business across the industry. This is the power to build the bridges across the disciplines and construction partners to reduce conflict and improve efficiencies throughout the industry. As we all know, technology is changing all the time, and Leslie has touched on that in a great detail. And we all need to keep abreast of the changes and understand the benefits that it can bring our industry in both accuracy, efficiency, and retention. But we touch on the diversity. As employers, we must challenge ourselves to understand the real diverse and inclusive generation of the future workforce, and break away from our diversity inclusion policy documents that we all sit behind and really develop the balance of workforce that our industry deserves. I feel that the industry needs a societal challenge to help it deliver this. It has been challenged by my whole career. I've been challenged in the whole career by this problem. The new workforce are definitely best placed to encourage the very best young people to understand our industry. So we really need our new workforce to help us develop these young people and the future of our industry. Finally, the climate agenda is one that cannot and should not go away. The new people, the young people entering the industry just now will really face the nightmare that will develop if we do not, all of us, make a difference now. If you think COVID has changed our business practices over the past 8 months, this will be nothing compared to the changes needed to society if we don't get a grip of the climate change now. So we must all help to make the change. I believe that the emerging professionals need to be empowered to help us make these changes for both our and their future. So thank you so much for developing the report. Hopefully it'll be part of the industry going forward. I thank you for that. And I'll hand you back to Mark on that, and thank you for that. And I apologize for the barking in the background during my talk. Thanks, then.
Super, thank you, Simon. I can only assume that was your daily Amazon delivery. Okay, Martin, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, and hi everyone. I'm delighted to join the panel today. I've been asked to focus on the workplace element of the report, and I think probably what's encouraging to me, given the role that I'm in at the moment at Arcadis, is that there's no kind of mention of the physical workplace, which is great, because what we're seeing in the industry at the moment is everybody's become an expert on hybrid working, and everybody's become an expert on what our offices should look like, and it is quite a complex problem that really does start with culture. And I think I was really impressed reading the report that diversity and inclusion kind of sits at the heart of it, because Leslie and Simon have talked about this, how important it is, and Simon drew it out just then on, it's not about having a policy, it's about actually doing something about this. And what I'm interested in at the moment, particularly on the inclusion piece, is that our new ways of working, we're all virtual today, is this going to give us a better opportunity for people who perhaps haven't been included in the workplace before to voice their opinions? I think it really does present that kind of uniqueness in a virtual environment, that you can dictate meetings far more, you can invite people to speak without them feeling uncomfortable. So I'm really excited to see how that kind of develops. I think moving on from that, there was 8 characteristics. I haven't got time to go through them all today, so I've tried to draw out a couple. And what struck me was around the purpose and meaningful work, and I joined that together with the walk in the talk. And because I think that's really important, that the alignment of those 2 values are fundamental. The report is rightly pulling out that what leaders say and then what actually happens is quite often disconnected. And it is, I think you're right to identify that that's middle management that potentially does that. But that is with, I think, to give credit there, that it is with the best interests of delivering against what are often quite challenging objectives around projects. That doesn't mean that we can't do something about that. And I think that links then to the ability to move people around on projects. We see too often that people are stuck there and they can't move on because commercially it makes absolute sense. And really that's something that we need as an industry to really crack. I've been fortunate to work in other industries. I've worked in the accounting profession for 7 years, and they are really, really good at kind of moving people around on projects, and we really need to embrace that. The other one that really struck me, and something that's really close to my heart at the moment in terms of what we're trying to deliver in Arcadis, is that flexibility and work-life balance. And again, I think that really ties closely into inclusion. I look at it that flexibility and work-life balance is just that, it's a balance. Sometimes you have to work extremely hard, and sometimes you need to take that time back. But the assumption that we tend to have that everybody is in the same situation and everybody has the same set of circumstances really has to change. Balance becomes harder in the environment that we're currently in. And we really need to consider carefully what unconscious bias drives around balance and flexibility. Organisations have to build a trust-based culture, that's fundamental, and measure outputs. They mustn't get into a situation again where we're measuring inputs, because my watch out on that is if you start to measure inputs, you naturally default to your unconscious bias, and that really presents problems in developing an inclusive strategy. The final point, because I'm conscious of time, is collaboration, and that's a real, again, hot topic at the moment. How do we effectively collaborate when we're not face to face? I think we're all kind of learning that. And where I think the report is good on that, it calls out the need to develop behavioural frameworks, and that they need to be in place. And I think that the emerging professionals have got a key role to play in developing what those behavioural frameworks look like. And they do need to communicate, and they do need to understand and pass on how they have developed over the course of their careers to date, because as is rightly acknowledged, we've developed in a different time, in a different era, and we can't just overlay, we have to take that learning in. So, fantastic report. I think it was really enjoyable to kind of go through it, and I'm looking forward to some of the questions. So back to Mark.
Thanks very much, Martin. Thanks for these very valuable comments. Okay, conscious of time, so I now want to pass over to our emerging professionals. So first of all, Nikita, could you give us your comments and views, please?
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I just wanted to actually echo a lot of what Martin has said. Firstly, I'd actually like to begin by saying that the findings of this report really resonated with me as an emerging professional in my short professional career. I thought that my experiences and the challenges I faced within the industry were unique to me, but actually it seems that some of those issues around transparency and the deep desire for impact and meaningful work and challenge is actually really quite widespread. I do want to second what Georgia said in reading the report. I definitely agree with many of all of the 8 principles or 8 characteristics of the workplace, but it is true that there's no one size fits all. Each company is different, each firm is different, and I guess the solutions for those companies will all be tailored to that. moving on quickly to the characteristics of the workplace, it was interesting for me to see that there was there was a lot of mention of what I see as sort of self-actualization, which is picked up in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is not a bulletproof theory in any way, but interesting to see that self-actualization continues to be a very important need for the emerging professionals of today. The two principles I wanted to just concentrate on were flexibility and work-life balance, which I think have been pretty popular today in our discussion, and perhaps because of the current situation that we find ourselves in working from home. I think it's clear by now that throughout this pandemic and other crises, the businesses that adapt quickly are the ones that will see these crises through successfully. As an emerging professional, I do feel that remote working in some shape or form is the future. And I know that not everybody has had a positive experience, but in my experience, I've been much more productive working remotely than I had been working from the office. I have better physical well-being and also mental well-being. I'm sleeping much more than I did when I was commuting to and from the office. And I know that some of my colleagues have had very similar experiences. I know, again, that there's no one size fits all. I know that there are people who have caring responsibilities, who can't work the traditional 9 to 5 working day. And so I think this is something that going forward firms must adapt to and cater to. And finally, on diversity and inclusion, I've been involved in a lot of diversity and inclusion work since the murder of George Floyd and the upsurge in the BLM movement once again. And when we discuss diversity, this is also picked up in the report. When we discuss diversity, it's not gender and ethnicity. It's much more than that. It's sexual orientation, it's disability, it's religion, it's marital status, it's age, pregnancy. The list goes on. You know, the protected characteristics can be Googled quite easily. I really am of the opinion that there's no time like the present to take practical action to make sure that we are being diverse and inclusive. We don't live in a homogenous society, and I don't think that our firms should in any way be homogenous, particularly if we are to understand the needs of end users or those that we're delivering solutions to. And finally, on that point, I just wanted to say that I think we should be challenging ourselves, not just to be representative of the wider society that we live in, but also to ensure that we are creating equitable outcomes for all employees. We don't come from the same backgrounds. We all come from very different circumstances, and all of us need different solutions to progress in our careers. So whether that's through providing enhanced mentoring, guidance, support, etc., you know, flexible working patterns, whatever it is. And finally, Martin did pick up on physical workplace adjustments, which is something that I wanted to pick up on. So I think something that's not mentioned in the report is physical workplace adjustments, and I think the list goes on and on. One thing I did want to pick out is that in my former company, I had a colleague who used to pray a couple of times a day. Now, we used to have meeting rooms that had windows and glass doors, so there was no privacy when my colleague was praying. A very simple solution for that would be, you know, putting in blinds so that we have meeting rooms that are multifunctional. You know, are we creating offices and workplaces that are suitable for wheelchair users? Are we providing colored screens for our colleagues who may be dyslexic? How about, you know, color blindness? What kind of adjustments are we making in the workplace, or even when our colleagues are working from home, for this diverse workforce? So that's my piece. I just wanted to say I'm really happy to see that diversity and inclusion has been given such great importance, and that the business leaders too echo this. But it really is time for practical action.
Great, thank you very much, Nikita. Okay, Jordan, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think the fact that there's so much overlap with the speakers is actually beautiful to see, because it's a testament that this report has actually done an amazing job of extracting these core and key themes and vocalize them. So I'm not going to apologize for for reiterating anything that anyone might have already touched on. It's a very interesting time, and a lot of my friends and loved ones, when I'm going to see, I shouldn't say this, but if I do go to see them or speak to them on the phone, it's almost as if they've put their life on hold. And I'm desperately trying to convince them not to do this, because it's not the case. The world, as always, is moving. And it's important to move with the times, because that gives you the best ability or the best chance to steer the future in the direction that it needs to go. So I think the timeliness of this report really adds to how much it can contribute to steering the future in the direction it needs to go. And just wanted to very personally and sincerely recommend everyone does take the time to, really read and digest this report. If you're interested in furthering those discussions, do get in touch with the ACE's Emerging Professionals Group, and that would be a great step forward. Personally, I think the biggest thing that stood out to me about the report itself was the honesty. As many people have already touched on, the report really highlights this idea of transparency, that my generation is so informed and has so much access to information that we almost intrinsically demand a greater degree of transparency from our businesses. And yeah, that's really key insight for any business owner, any CEO, but that's not actually the point that I'd like to make. I think the report is unapologetic and very transparent in presenting these findings, and therefore is actually walking the talk, is actually walking the walk, is enacting and embodying the future. And that is exactly what needs to take place for the future, as I say, to go in the direction that it needs to go. So I was just totally encapsulated. I felt like I really resonated with the report, and I'm sure a lot of the emerging professionals will also. So I'd like to encourage them to read it. I think diversity is being talked about enough, but I just would like to very quickly highlight why it's so important. And the construction minister did touch on it, but it's not just an ethical argument as it's sometimes framed, although that is one that we can have offline if you want, and I'm keen to present those arguments to you. But there's actually a very practical and more business kind of related arguments to it. But the biggest of which, to me, is that, Einstein did touch on this idea of, if you find yourself in a problem, then to solve that problem, you can't apply the same thinking. We found ourselves in this climate crisis, and it's as a result of a certain way of thinking. And therefore, we need to change the approach. And diversity really does that. It really gives us the best chance to approach problems in a different way. So as Nikita touched on, we're not just talking about racial diversity or gender diversity. It goes as far as, neurodiversity, diversity in terms of competition. They're not just being these big dominant organizations that's winning all the work, but smaller niche companies that approach things quite differently, and therefore increase that competition and make us and force us to take alternative approaches. So without ruining the read for anyone, I would hopefully a personalized in the limited time I had some of the key topics and themes I resonated with in the report. And as I say, please, let's keep this discussion going and let's actually act on it as well.
Great, thanks, Jordan. Some very good and very strong points that you made there, so thank you. Okay, and last but by no means least, Becca, can I hand over to you, please?
Thanks, Mark. Is it too short to say I think everything's been summarised excellently? I'm done. Thank you. So again, I can only reiterate how refreshing it was to read the outcomes of this report. I think it resonates with anybody at any level, and certainly from an individual level, whether you're a people manager, whether you're running projects or teams, or whether you're even at a higher senior leadership level, there's something to take away from this report. It is a disruptive time. We know that things have been turned on the heads, the ways that we're working, how we're working together geographically and remotely, but it's also an opportunity to press the reset button. And I think some of these recommendations made as part of the report give some really good opportunities to maybe revisit your policies and your processes, and actually how, when we look to return to the workforce and workplace, physically or remotely, what does that look like in this new norm that we refer to? I think for me, I was looking in particular at the role families part of the report, and particularly moving towards this industry that we're terming 4.0, and we're moving towards this 5G of 5 different generations working together in the work environment. What does that actually mean for the future of the workforce? Sat behind a context of the client being ever more demanding. And the ACE did a report last year around value-based business models and reinforcing the level of work that a consultant needs to do, which is 100k in value, actually any outputs around 6k in profit. So with the decline in profit margins, I think it's never been so more important for businesses to be able to unlock that client value, and looking at that whole cycle life approach to design. So business models, as it's iterated in the report, will never be one size fits all. All businesses are diverse and beautiful and unique in their own way. So it will, if anything, maybe become a bit more bespoke to the client, the service, the risk, and also the capabilities as well of those particular consultancies. What was interesting for me in the job role families is that there was one common job role across both A and B, which was the solution builder. So we're now talking about this digital element and software developers and this, these collaborative platforms that we're looking to share data on. That seems to be a growing area and a growing role, certainly, where I can see skills being required moving into the future. With the automation of design processes, we've seen the introduction of BIM. A lot of businesses are maybe operating at maybe more, level 1 of BIM. You're doing quite well if you're working in level 2, and 3 is kind of at an arm's reach for most at the moment. So, the integration of that and unlocking, that potential for off-site development, that collaboration together to make sure that when things are delivered on site, that they are minimized in risk and cost, and we are doing things more efficiently and productively. I think the use of virtual reality, which again is something quite interesting, that particularly within our business we work to BIM, and we do also use virtual reality. We utilise the younger staff to help enforce that. So we're using apprentices and graduates who are leading on technical groups to help inform and lead on this. They are digital natives in their descriptive nature. So we're trying to empower the staff to actually lead and inform and be part of those conversations and policies and implementations that we're doing moving forward day to day. Another interesting area for myself was around the skill sets. I think developing capabilities and what they look like moving forward is that the core technical area will always remain and always be prominent. However, it's the softer skills, it's the leadership, it's the people management that seems to be the area of which is definitely within growth, and leading to what was previously been mentioned around diversity of thought. It's all those different areas of being creative and being a problem solver and looking for those innovations. So certainly I think an approach to development and training does need to consider that, because we are maybe addressing it in a typical way. Similarly with the career pathways, academically we've seen a lot of change and an improvement in the number of apprenticeships that have been uptaken, and the apprenticeship levy it's not being maximised to its most benefit. And I think we can probably agree across the board, across all sides, consultancies and contractors, that that's probably a reality for everyone. It's how we maybe more engage with academia to influence what is happening through the curriculum, understanding how we can help build the future graduates and what they can expect coming into this ever-changing workplace. So for me, I think it is very much again around collaboration and that communication between industries, academia and professional bodies to make sure that that conversation and that transparency is there with everybody, so we can look to build, you know, the emerging professionals of the future. Thanks, Mark.
Great, thank you very much, Rebecca. Well, listen, thank you all very much. It's really good to hear there's so many joined up views and comments and priorities that have come out of that session. So moving on now, we have about 10 minutes to take some questions from the floor. There's some really good questions that have come through, which I'll now pick and pass over to the panelists before I hand back to Hannah to wrap up at about 1:25. So moving on to the questions. First question, and I'll just quickly answer this on behalf of the industry, and it was, to what extent is COVID reducing the number of graduates being employed in the construction industry this year? And by when will any reduction be recovered? As I say, I think speaking to my peer group, I think it's fair to say we've probably seen about half the graduate intake this year across the industry. But I know there's a desire from fellow CEOs and businesses to get back to the 2019 level next year. And I certainly know from a WSP point of view, that is our intent. So we've had a bit of a blip this year, but everybody's passionate about getting back to 2019 levels next year. Moving on to another question, and I'll pass this one to Simon. Simon, one of the audience has asked, they'd like to hear, and they'd be interested in your views as to whether academia is looking forward enough to the workplace environment, or are they still concentrating on the basic technical and theoretical skills required for civil engineering?
Well, particularly with regards to civil engineering, I think there is a need for a balance between the core knowledge needed and the ability to develop at some of the other elements of it. I don't think academia have got the ability to change quickly. I don't think the Engineering Council help in that, particularly when it comes to engineering, civil engineering and structural engineering. I don't think the Engineering Council help in the ability for the institutions to be able to develop and change as fast as they need to. And so I think it's a whole industry type response that we need to try and ensure that the academia can develop courses that, one, young people want to do, and two, industry want to receive at the far end.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Martin, I'll pass this one to you. What more can be done to learn from other industries and sectors to meet the challenges that we face? That's a big question.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a very big question. I mean, I said that in the context of my kind of previous experience of how effectively some of the big four move their people around. Look, I think that we as an industry have developed that massively now, that there are most of the larger sort of consultancies are able now to put in rotation programs and have the commercial ability to do that, because of course how I would look at it was that the time I was there, that the big four were commanding extremely high fees, and we as an industry were not in that same commercial bracket. That has shifted over time, and I think that's really welcome, that our services are seen to be as valuable, or in my opinion, more valuable than a lot of the accountancy practices would now provide. I think it still represents a challenge for SMEs. Commercial delivery and making a profit is everything to the smaller organisations, but that doesn't mean we can't make progress in being able to rotate people, to give them that variety and that purpose that they quite rightly seek and need in order to develop as they go forward.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Martin. Leslie, one for you right up your street. In the face of all this technological disruption and structural issues in some organisations, how can young professionals arm themselves to be able to be productive and contribute to this ever-changing workplace?
Well, actually, one of the beauties of technology and doing these things in this way is I was actually chatting about that offline quickly with one of our leaders in WSP, Mark, Jane Grant, who's head of learning development and EDI. And because my thought was, because I saw that come in, my thought was absolutely it's around diversity. You know, you've got to embrace the sort of network around you. Ask, engage, I wrote, and also make sure that you look at, in Jane's better terminology, inclusive mentoring. You know, look for the mentors and coaches who are different from you. Nikita touched on this as well. There's real broad thought on diversity. Look in terms of age, culture, diversity, and thought. It's certainly something we're going to be focusing on in our WSP D&I strategy for 2021. But I think for me, especially sort of new young professionals coming in who might not have had quite the privilege, particularly now, Mark, of being sat in a world where they can perhaps chat to somebody next to them and not potentially go to their line manager because they might think it's a daft question. There is nothing wrong with questioning absolutely anything, and I would embrace people to really look to questioning on anything, and don't sit there not wanting to sort of raise the point. And I think actually technology sometimes, and we've seen this through the COVID response, can be easier if you're doing it through a sort of technological medium. But that's kind of my view, is really look for people who can bring something that you haven't got, but also look to the diversity in its broadest sense.
Okay, yep, thank you very much, Leslie. Okay, the next one I'm going to direct to Nikita, because I think you touched on this in your 5 minutes. So although much of the workforce has moved to working from home, there's still the need for physical face-to-face collaboration around the water cooler conversation, etc. How do you think these needs can be met in the current environment and going forward?
Thanks, Mark. So one thing that, I mean, I've been trying to do in my work is instill once a month coffee conversations with certain colleagues. We're now looking at in my team perhaps doing, you know, a weekly tea session, for example, or I think also it's really important to harness the technology that we have available to us. So if it's, you know, a matter of using Microsoft Teams or Zoom to just have IM messages with your colleagues, you know, and just give them a quick call if they have a few minutes free. I think we really need to just be doing what we can to use the technology that we have available to make sure that we're having those conversations that would kind of happen naturally in the office.
Okay, no, thank you. Jordan or Becca, would you like to comment?
I guess I'd just like to say that there, as pointed out by Georgia, there's ACE emerging professionals groups across the nation, and we're always keen to have it, you know, future leaders involved in the committees and exchange ideas with you, and, you know, deliver webinars and events that touch on some of those subjects. So if you are looking to develop those skills and keep up to date with some of the key trends, and as I touched on earlier, please do get in touch. The door's always open, and I'm sure it'll be a benefit to you professionally and personally.
Okay, thanks, Jordan. Okay, I'm going to pick one final question. There's many coming in and they're getting more complicated, so we could be here for a while if I was to go through them all, but I'll pick one more. And Georgia, I'll direct this at you, but others please feel free to chip in. So associated with the changing workplace environment, we're seeing an increase in incidents of fraud. What role does the panel feel that the emerging professionals can play in combating fraud, both in the workplace environment and on projects? So sorry, Georgia, that's a bit of a difficult one, but I thought we'd finish with you.
No, thank you, Mark. I think we should all feel empowered to report fraud. I know certainly within Arcadis and within my previous company as well, there were stringent measures in place and ways that you could do that anonymously if you felt you needed to, but we should all feel empowered to be able to do that and report that up through our organisations, be that on projects or within the workplace environment. I think there's certainly across a number of many different member firms, there are ways in which we can do that within both companies and more sort of colloquially as well across friends groups, and raise that up internally within business structures. I think that emerging professionals, there's a wealth of training out there that certainly I know Arcadis are picking up on, my previous employer had, and I'm certain that WSP, Goodson's Associates and the rest of AC members will all have similar training on how to spot fraud and how to avoid it. So it's keeping up to date with that and feeling empowered to be able to report this through the appropriate business line.
Good. No, well answered, Georgia. Thank you for that. So I'm going to finish there. So thank you all to the panelists for taking part today. I think that's been a fantastic discussion and certainly brought the report to life. And I'd now like to hand back to Hannah to close the event.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thanks again to the panellists. That was really interesting and quite nice in our sector to have such a diverse set of views and observations actually on the panel. So that was brilliant, and I really enjoyed listening to it all. I'm just going to say a few words now, just to kind of close out and sort of say where we're going to go next with this. So the first thing is, look, the report is out there now officially. It is in the public domain. You will get a link sent through to you if you've been on this webinar, but please do download it. Please read it. This is a real resource for you. We've just sort of had a glimpse of some of the insights in it today, but actually there is huge value in that. I would really again commend the emerging professionals for being so honest in this report, and we owe it to them to read it because they took the time, because they were so open actually, and put down some quite uncomfortable, very honest things on paper. So please do take the time to read that. I think they all deserve your time in taking the time to read it. Moving forward, as a business leader, I would urge you to sort of think about this as a blueprint. It gives you a structure, but it also gives you some ideas and some pointers on culture. Those 8 characteristics really, I think, start to, we love a structure in this industry. We love a sort of bit of guidance, a bit of, code we can apply and test ourselves against. So pick that up. But having said that, don't just go and take it and do a tick box exercise and rag status and check your policies. Actually take this and have a conversation with your emerging professionals about it. So if there is one takeaway, I would urge you to read the report, digest it, but then use that and use the structure that it gives you to have a conversation, because that is how you will get the most value out of it. That is the essence and the insight behind this. It's not about giving you something we will score ourselves against. As much as we love to do that as an industry, please take it and use it as a resource to have a conversation and start some of that transparency and start some of that openness. And lastly, just to touch on what ACE is going to do with this, it's given us a very clear mandate for what we're going to be doing over the next year or so, how we will be working, empowering our emerging professionals network further going forward, but also to support our members and work with our peers, the professional bodies, the Engineering Council, to actually embed some of this. So we've got a really clear mandate now from the emerging professionals. We're going to be taking it seriously. I'd encourage you to do the same in your businesses. And overall, my concluding remarks really are that we've got the ingredients here, with our opportunity to deliver such value and bring our emerging professionals into the workplace to be actively involved in that. We have all the ingredients to be the industry of choice. I think it's really down to us now to make that happen and to stand ourselves out in terms of the culture, in terms of the structure, the development, the types of conversations and the honesty that the emerging professionals will need going forward to really make us the sector of choice for them. So the challenge is ours. I would encourage you to use this resource to move your businesses forward. And I'm sure we'll see actually who really takes this on board over the next 12 months. Thank you very much for joining us all today. Bye.